All right. Well, we had a riveting Thursday night football game between
Riveting.
Mark's Chicago Bears and the Carolina Panthers, who, the Bears helped their case and didn't help their case all at the same time with sending the Panthers to an even higher likelihood to get the number one overall pick, which, of course, the Bears own that pick.
Yep.
And the Bears themselves get their third win of the season, so they're not in any jeopardy of threatening to move outside of the top 10 either. So right now, Mark, they are in good positioning. But here in the Football Lounge, bringing you a bonus episode to talk about the Bears, the state of the team, Thursday Night Football recap, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Las Vegas Raiders saga that continues to evolve since we obviously didn't have a show dedicated to that being out the past couple weeks. But let's focus here on Thursday Night Football to begin with. Bears get a 16-13 win. Tyson Bagent, with his arm wrestling champion father in the stands, gets a win for the Chicago Bears, his second of the season now. So it's 2 wins for Tyson,
2 and
1
2
for Justin Fields, and now you got a quandary on your hands.
Oh, yeah, a real quandary.
Of course, we're starting Justin Fields moving forward once he's healthy, which it looks like next week, Mark, he'll be able to go 10 days to get ready and healthy there. But Bears get the win. It didn't look convincing. A lot of takeaways from this game, particularly since we, got to see Bryce Young on the national stage, which I believe this was the first nationally televised game for the Panthers that I can think of off the top of my head. So first time for the nation, really, maybe to get an extended look at Bryce Young.
I'm not sure
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if they had a primetime game before that. I will start with the Panthers here really quickly before we jump into the Bears, just in talking about the game before we get into the real state of the union with the Bears. I don't understand at all what the Panthers are doing. I mean, 38 pass attempts for Bryce Young. The Bears have a stout rush defense, but Miles Sanders was not involved in the offense at all. He was kind of their one big free agent signing besides the Adam Thielen get. Chuba Hubbard, not enough carries. I felt like when they actually committed to running the ball at times, like he was making some headway in the game. The game was always close. They were ahead for a large portion of the game after that punt return. I think there needs to be more common sense in that organization. And I wonder if it's top down where they feel the pressure from David Tepper and so they are just trying to showcase Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud's explosion has not helped Bryce Young at all. I really, really wish this Panthers organization would just commit to protecting him and running the football and building a foundation to where then you can have success going forward, because you're going to get this kid killed. He has CJ Stroud. We said it last week, like he has nothing to work with. Bryce Young has nothing to work with, but CJ Stroud, at least there's an elite left tackle. There's some speed, and he's a big, strong athlete who can stand in the pocket.
Yeah.
Bryce Young, at times, I thought there was some pop when he was mobile and scrambling a little bit. But man, oh man, on some of those deep out routes and deep balls, he just doesn't have it. And he's not capable right now of rifling the ball in there into tight windows, and his receivers are getting no separation. It's just ugly with Carolina right now. Really, really ugly. So, there's already rumblings that they could move on from Frank Reich. I think that'd be a big mistake. I think you need stability with this kid. I think it's not Reich's fault that the cupboards are so bare in Carolina, what he came into, and they need a real overhaul and a lot of work to be done. And the problem is they don't have a lot of ammunition to do it. They gave up next year's second round pick 2 to the Bears for this trade. They don't have their first rounder this year. They have got to be aggressive in free agency and building a real offensive line, a real run game, and a play action game that he then can thrive off of going forward in the future. I'll let you talk about Carolina before we jump into the Bears, but that's just how I feel right now. If I was a Carolina Panthers fan, I'd be screaming on Twitter every day, protect this kid, run the ball, create an identity. They don't have any of that right now.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely with that sentiment. And on top of that, especially the latter part of what you talked about there, which is the draft capital aspect, this team has a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah.
I think that they have a lot of talent on defense overall. So, you're not as concerned about that aspect of the team. They obviously could use some linebackers and, another safety, but that aspect of the team is pretty well intact, but the offense does have a lot of holes. Clearly, they don't really have a running back, and they paid Miles Sanders for multiple years. And, he came back. He had been injured for a good portion of this season, comes back, and they haven't really been able to get anything going on the ground there. So they could use, a type of running back like a Christian McCaffrey, for lack of a better, example there, that can create on his own. They could use another offensive lineman, particularly on the right side of the line. They could use a true tight end. I mean, they're just not doing much with Hayden Hurst at all. Tommy Tremble is a fine backup tight end. And you mentioned it. I mean, no receivers to speak of that can get separation. Adam Thielen is fine in terms of a veteran wide receiver there that is a good possession receiver type of dude. But obviously at this age of in his career, he's not a guy that's going to create separation with his route running ability. And they don't have anyone else like that. You thought maybe rookie Jonathan Mingo would be the type of guy to maybe work himself into the rotation as a reliable a target for Bryce Young, like Tank Dell has been for C.J. Stroud in recent weeks. But we're not seeing that, obviously. And, they kind of gutted their team. And now, to your point, they don't have draft capital to make that up. Day 3 picks aren't going to be what gets this team over the hump in the next couple of years. So they're going to have to get through 2024. I think it's going to be another really rough year for them next year. And maybe that's what they need. But then you're going into year 3 with Bryce Young, with only having 2 years of him before you're going to have to restructure and get a deal done.
It'll be a make or break year for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so they're in a really difficult spot right now. Obviously at this point, despite not having those picks next season, they're going to probably still want to, tank a little bit here and at least get a high pick in round 3 and round 4 and round 5, so you can at least have some of those picks. But it's difficult. And, they're going to have to do the Tua Tagovailoa treatment. And so things weren't working out with Brian Flores there in Miami. They bring in an offensive guru in Mike McDaniel. That has clearly worked out really well. Tua has had a fantastic run game to help aid him. And on top of it, we've seen like Tua, there are several comps outside of their size. They're not huge arm guys. They, of course, can make all the deep throws. Anyone in the NFL can make these throws. That's why they're there. But they need to be in the right situation to make them. Tua has been put in the right situation because of the staff around him, because of the helping cast of a Tyreek Hill, a Jalen Waddle. If they can get those types of things done for Bryce Young, then I think that, the future's bright. But this goes to what we've heard year in and year out. It matters where you land in the NFL as a quarterback. And if they're going to do this for Bryce Young, then it's all well and good. If they don't, then he landed in the unfortunate spot and maybe his career peters out after a few years. That's just where we're at.
Yeah. All right. Now let's jump into it. I'm wearing my Bears hat. I want to make one thing really clear on today's, kind of extra episode. So going forward, as of now, all of our listeners know where I stand. I want this to be very clear. I'm going to thread a very, very thin needle here. As a diehard Chicago Bears fan, they are my life. I think about them all the time. I have problems. This is what
they're tough to watch, Mark.
In my dream scenario, this is what the next couple months look like. This is my dream scenario. My dream scenario is that Justin Fields comes back, plays really, really well. Plays really, really well, like we saw him play really well, like in that Denver game. And then in ways that they win some games but lose enough in the sense that it's still very obvious to all of us that this kid can play, this kid can be the future of the franchise, but overall, this organization is in a bad place because of the coaching staff involved. My dream scenario is that at the end of the football season, Matt Eberflus is fired, his staff is gutted, and the Bears bring in someone, a Ben Johnson, a Jim Harbaugh, Someone in
Canada.
No, don't do that. I was on a roll. Don't do that. And I almost said his name. I feel like, it's like saying Bloody Mary 3 times
Voldemort,
in front of the
dude.
Yeah, in front of the mirror. You don't want to do it. I got to the CA of his last name. It almost came out of my mouth. And so we're looking at that type of scenario where the Bears end up with about the 8th pick in the draft with their own pick. They win about 6 games. Justin Fields plays really well, is healthy the remainder of the year, but it's obvious that this coaching staff is not the right solution for this team going forward. You bring in one of those premier, a Ben Johnson, a Jim Harbaugh, an Eric Bieniemy, and you bring them in with the intention of saying Justin Fields is who we're building around. And now we have 2 top 10 picks to be aggressive and get creative in building around Justin Fields. One of the reasons why I feel confident that could happen is this that I saw on Twitter today, which was great. The Bears offensive line has only given up 5 sacks in the last 4 games, and they're still without Nate Davis. So Justin Fields has not benefited from the Tevin Jenkins coming back Bears offensive line. But you have Tevin Jenkins. If you can get Nate Davis back, Cody Whitehair, Lucas Patrick, Braxton Jones at the tackle, obviously Darnell Wright. All of a sudden now, this Bears offensive line is really starting to gel, especially that right side with Jenkins and Wright. And it's the future of your right side of your offensive line. Justin Fields could benefit from that. Khalil Herbert will be coming back in this now 10-day window that the Bears have to get ready for their next opponent. So there's a lot to like about where the offense will be and what Justin Fields will have to build around, right? And so this is the beginning of the thread. The second part of that thread will be then talking about the Panthers pick. I firmly believe at this point in time that Panthers pick is pretty much a guaranteed top 3 pick. That Panthers pick will be a top 3 pick with, in my opinion right now, it looks like the New York Giants and then a combination of the Raiders, Cardinals, Patriots, right? Some sort of that group, right? And so then what can the Bears do? If the pick ends up being the number 1 pick, the dream scenario would be to get the haul like you did for Bryce Young. Can you get someone else's next first-round pick, their this year's first-round pick, and an elite player off their squad? For example, if the pick ends up being the number 1 pick, can you go to the Raiders and say, we want Devontae Adams or Max Crosby, one of the two. We want this year's first-round pick, and we want next year's first-round pick. Deal done. All of a sudden, let's say it's Max Crosby, right? All of a sudden, the Bears say, in 2 years, they get DJ Moore, they get Max Crosby, they get multiple first-round picks, and then they're in the same scenario next year where you run with Justin Fields, and if he ends up stinking, then you don't pick up the 5th-year option, or if he's injured again and he just can't stay healthy enough, you end up with 2 first-round picks again next year, and you get to redo it. You know what I mean? Push this down the line. Give Justin Fields more time, all while you're not paying a quarterback, and you're paying Sweat, you're paying DJ Moore, you're paying Max Crosby, you're supporting, or maybe it's Devontae Adams, you're paying him. You know what I mean? And then that gives you so much flexibility to address the offensive line and other positions of need for your actual 2 other top 10 picks that you'll get with your pick, and then would it be the Raiders pick? So that, to me, right now, is the dream scenario. That's what I'm hoping for.
And you'd almost think that the Raiders' first pick the following year is going to be very high.
Still
again,
very
right?
high.
I mean, because they're in a tough spot. Yeah.
So that, to me, is dream scenario. The other second part of that would be a dream scenario would be you still end up with the number 1 or number 2 pick, or you have, even if it's the number 2 pick, you just take Marvin Harrison Jr. You don't trade it. You know what I mean? But if the Panthers somehow end up with the 3 pick, I think it's a guarantee the Bears stick with Justin Fields. If the Panthers pick is the 2 or the 1, depending on the haul you can get and depending on how Fields plays during the remainder of the year, then Fields has a real chance. So I think the Bears' flexibility, there's a ton of flexibility for the Chicago Bears. But what I am rooting for is that I will be rooting for Justin Fields the remainder of the year. I will be rooting for him to play extremely well. I'll be rooting for the Bears to win some games, but I will be rooting for them to still be dysfunctional organizationally because I am so done with Matt Eberflus. I don't want the Bears winning to be mistaken as now Matt Eberflus should keep his job. He should not keep his job. It has been proven he's not worthy of keeping his job. His press conferences alone show you he should not keep his job.
Yeah, this past week was not his finest moment.
The post locker room speech after the game last night was weird and keep stacking.
Oh, I didn't
keep stepping. It's just he's not the man you want leading your franchise. It was a mistake. It wasn't Ryan Poles' mistake. It was the franchise's mistake. Let Poles go out and get aggressive for whoever his next head coach might be. Jim Harbaugh, Ben Johnson, obviously are the dreams. But there are some other candidates out there I think worthy of really considering. And so I just want to be clear on that. The other thing I think, and before I turn it over to you here, my final point of what I really gained from last night and watched that game, and I tweeted it out. We don't have to watch Tyson Bagent anymore. Like, please, like, for the love of God, I feel really comfortable knowing now this kid got some experience. He is a capable backup quarterback. You had a backup quarterback play 4 games for you, start 4 games. He was 2-2. That's what you want from your backup quarterback. That's exactly what you want from your backup quarterback. In the worst case scenario, he has to play 4 games. He went 2-2. He kept it together enough. The problem was you were in such a hole by the time your backup got in there that you were already a 5-loss team, you know what I mean, through week 5. So you're in a really tough spot anyways. But he handled his stuff. He is a very capable backup, whether it's Justin Fields' backup, whether it is Caleb Williams' backup, whether it's Drake May's backup going forward. You found in an undrafted free agent who you're not paying anything a backup quarterback. That's great. That is really, really great news. And I think overall, I will credit the Chicago Bears team. They haven't had a moment yet, like the Raiders, who we'll talk about here coming up in a second, where the locker room basically decided and had a coup and a takeover, that they are going to keep scrapping. They're going to keep fighting. A win is a win. We don't come by them a lot in Chicago, so I was very, very pleased with the win last night. And overall, I've said it from the beginning of the year, you'd rather Carolina's pick be the highest pick and your own pick be wherever it falls, because you're winning games and you want to keep building your franchise and growing your franchise. I will make it clear my final stance. I'm rooting for Justin Fields. I still believe the best case scenario for this organization going forward to be a consistent winner long-term is Justin Fields. He's got to prove he can stay healthy, and he's got to keep playing football the way he did against Denver and against Washington throughout the remainder of the year. And I think that we've already seen enough from Matt Eberflus to know he's not the guy going forward.
Yeah, I think the Bears are in a unique spot to where it's kind of a win-win for them regardless, because if the wheels do fall off, if everything goes wrong here and Justin Fields isn't the guy, then you likely have the 1 and 2. And Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., that's a franchise-altering type of draft right there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you never know until the guys play, but in terms of prospects and projections, that would be that type of move. So, worst case scenario is Justin Fields isn't the guy. The team's in disarray. They have to kind of clean house and start from scratch. Well, they have the assets to start from scratch. They're able to do that, and it wouldn't create so much of a pivot for them as it would for some other teams where they're going to have to now start selling the farm and really starting things over. You already have a guy on the defensive side now that you're going to anchor with Montez Sweat getting his big deal. Hopefully you get a little bit more out of the linebackers that you've wanted to see. You have a Jalen Johnson who obviously I would imagine you want them to get that figured out so that he can be kind of a long-term fixture in the defensive backfield as well. So they have some guys that they can rally around, and offensively just keep kind of chipping away at that. And then on the flip side, if Justin Fields is the guy, then you also have a great problem with having 2 high picks that you then can sell off and continue to stack more capital and build your team around, because this team still does have plenty of holes. So you do need multiple picks to spend on, a center and some guards, and another wide receiver, and maybe the backfield.
And like 8 centers. Keep drafting centers till you get it right. My God.
Getting some more centers. Gosh, yeah, definitely need that. An outside backer, of course, and some more defensive backs. I'll go to you because I do have a question for you as well.
Yeah, what is the
relates
question?
To a certain other position? But no, I want to hear what you have to say first.
So
about
I guess
those.
to me, like going back to like my whole Max Crosby trade idea, that scenario again, if the worst case scenario for the Chicago Bears is that the pick falls to Carolina's going to be 1, 2, or 3, right? That pick's going to be, there's no way we feel like they're going to get to 4 or 5 wins and get to that 4 spot. It's just not, even though their schedule's weak, they might get to 3 wins, but again, that probably is still going to be in that almost guaranteed top 3 pick. So in worst case scenario, the Carolina pick is 3 and you just take Marvin Harrison Jr. You know what I mean? Like, that's worst case scenario for Chicago right now. That is an amazing place to be. But if you end up with the 1 pick or the 2 pick and you feel really confident that Justin Fields is your guy and you don't love your evaluations on Drake May and Caleb Williams, right? Think of the bidding war. I mean, think of not just the Raiders. Arizona would be in maybe on that. New York, the Giants would maybe be in trying to trade up to that number 1 or number 2 pick. The New England Patriots trading up for that number 1 or number 2 pick. The Rams, the Seahawks, maybe even in division, the Vikings and the Packers. Like
Patriots,
Atlanta. Like, there are real teams that could be looking at that as a serious option for them to trade up to. Seattle. Like, you're telling me I can't get DK Metcalf in your next 2 first-round picks for you to go up and go get Caleb Williams? You know what I mean? Like, that's what you're going to – that's the kind of haul you could get.
Who's to say that they couldn't get that type of haul for the number 3 pick? Because it's not just about the position where you are. It's about who's coming after you too, right? Teams want to make sure that the number 4 pick doesn't get Drake May in that instance, right?
Exactly right.
The price goes up.
Exactly right. So I think worst case scenario, I mean, the Bears are going to be really able to improve their team. To me, I just don't want to get distracted by the fact that I will be, as a fan today, very upset if my coach next year. The thing I'll be most upset about is my coach next year is Matt Eberflus. Whether it's Justin Fields, whether it's Caleb Williams, Drake May, and all these other things, the thing I'll be most upset about is if my coach is Matt Eberflus. The second thing I'll be most upset about is if my new head coach is a defensive guy. Like, we're at the point where you have to go. Nagy was the wrong offensive guy, but there are offensive guys out there, Jim Harbaugh, Ben Johnson being the 2 dream scenario candidates, that, like, those are real options that really need to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that would be a great boost for this team. And when you're young and kind of rebuilding or trying to establish that foundation, it's a good spot to start. The question I had for you, it's a smaller one. It's less consequential, but I'm just curious because I haven't gotten to watch the Bears a whole lot this season. They usually have been playing when the Steelers do, and obviously, like, I spend more time watching the Steelers. I'm just curious about Roschon Johnson because there was a lot of hype about him coming out. What's the deal with him, especially with Khalil Herbert getting hurt? Like, I thought that was going to open up a lot more opportunities for the young rookie. Is he just not playing to the level that
he missed
pre-draft?
2 games with a concussion. He got a concussion early in the game, and then he had to miss 2 games because of the concussion. So that was a chunk. So it's basically 3 games out. And in that time, it was also the same time Khalil Herbert was out. And so they've turned to D'Onta Foreman, they signed this kid Evans. And they are a really kind of fun thunder and lightning, generic, Dollar Tree brand of thunder and lightning. And
Foreman's a very solid,
they played well.
No doubt.
What I think you've seen last night, especially, is Roschon is a real weapon blocking. Like, he had a couple really nice blocks in the backfield. And I think as time now continues on, as Herbert's coming back, I think that rotation will go back to a little bit of normal, and you're going to want to see more of what Roschon has at this point in time of the year. And so I expect Roschon to be more involved as the weeks continue on. But I think the problem is right now is they really do have a real depth of running backs. Khalil Herbert, D'Onta Foreman, this Evans kid has been a nice surprise, little, dink and dunk out of the backfield. And then Roschon Johnson's kind of the one full all-around back. And so I'd like to see him play more. I really want to see him play more. I'm with you on that. But I think part of it has just been that's the one spot they've had a little bit of an embarrassment of riches. And he also was dealing with the concussion and had to miss 2.5 weeks basically because of it.
Well, so is this like a position that you don't consider Like you would want them to address so many other spots.
Yeah, running back at this point in time, I'm very
confident,
content with whoever's carrying the rock. I want them to run the ball more. I want them to have an identity running the ball. I'd like for it to be Roschon Johnson. I feel like he is your if you look at the traditional like every down, third down back, like he's 1 through 3, like he's your guy. I like his size, his hands, his blocking overall. But again, it's just kind of where that positions fall. The Bears' absolute needs are center, guard, or right tackle, depending on left tackle, depending on Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones played really well last night. He might be the answer. So center or guard, and then definitely center. And then they need an elite 3 technique. And then you probably are it's due to move on from Eddie Jackson at the safety spot. Like his prime is past, and he's now hanging on for dear life a little bit. Like a real strong leader in the safety position. Like to me, those are the 3 biggest gaps right now: elite 3 technique, another pass rusher, a center, and a safety. Running back is by committee. I'm comfortable with Chicago with where they're at.
Well, going back to to put a bow on all of this, going back to your statement about Matt Eberflus and moving on from that, obviously you don't want the Bears to turn into the Las Vegas Raiders with the carousel, but it is the right move, and I totally agree with you there. But that kind of will segue us into this conversation. We'll spend a few more minutes talking about the Raiders because we mentioned it on this previous episode. If you didn't catch it, check out our Monday show where we did our Week 9 recap and kind of went over some of the items missed in the weeks prior. But obviously the Raiders was probably the biggest storyline to come out of those couple of weeks, with them firing Josh McDaniels after just a season and not even a half into his tenure with the Raiders. Obviously, he has had a couple stints now as a head coach in the league, and they have not lasted long. He's clearly at this point just not head coach material.
Yeah.
And it is becoming more apparent as well. I don't want to make this talk about the Patriots, but that the Patriot way is seeming much more likely that it was Belichick and Brady, and that it doesn't work elsewhere. Any of Belichick's coaching tree has not succeeded in the NFL. We've had the Matt Patricia, we've had the Brian Flores experiment, we've had the Josh McDaniels experiment, and Bill O'Brien. It's just not working. And so that's an interesting aspect to take all of this. But the question is, what is going on with the Raiders? I mean, if we just think to the last 2 years of their timeline, really, and even, a year before that with the move from Oakland to Vegas, establishing kind of a new identity, a new franchise, if you will, while trying to stick to the culture that they had established in Oakland as being the bad boys of the NFL, trying to keep with that. But hiring Josh McDaniels to turn things around. Just prior to that, having Rich Bisaccia have such success as the interim coach after the whole John Gruden scandal went down. He had a lot of success. They didn't hire him. They let him walk after that. We just saw a story come out with Mark Davis saying he regretted not hiring Rich Bisaccia after that stint. Goes and hires Josh McDaniels to turn things around. They get rid of Derek Carr, their franchise quarterback. They bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, who had the experience with Josh McDaniels from New England. That clearly didn't manifest in the way they wanted. So he gets benched. Now they start rookie Aiden O'Connell. And McDaniels gets fired. That just this whole thing, man. It's been a whirlwind for them, it seems, of the past 3 years with just big news in the league. And there's not much on the horizon. So, I'll kind of turn this over to you. Just where are we at with the Raiders?
Yeah.
What needs to be done with this team? Because maybe, just maybe, if they do okay with Antonio Pierce, maybe the route is to honestly not go out and try and make a big splash. Maybe some stability is what this organization needs more than anything else.
Yeah. And financially, it's what they might have to do, because Pierce is not going to command a ton.
Yeah.
And they can't afford to do anything else. I truly think the Raiders are one of those, like, oh my God, they won last week. You know what I mean? 30 points against the Giants. They got really lucky that Daniel Jones got injured early. And then the Giants are just, are now the worst. I think besides the Panthers, the worst team in football. Like they are it. And the Raiders' schedule is brutal. Obviously, Sunday night they host the Jets. I really think they have got to. The Jets are. If the Jets can get a defensive performance like they got against the Chargers, they should win this game. They really should, because they're playing AOC is no Herbert, and Zach Wilson. I mean, as long as he turns over like one less time, they could have won that game. So say the Raiders do find a way to beat the Jets. Their schedule posts that at Dolphins, that's a loss. Hosting the Chiefs, that's a loss. Hosting the Vikings, who the Vikings now are really, really feisty, and they are showing like they are not giving up at all. Really tough.
And they're a better team, yeah.
And then you have hosting the Chargers, that's a loss. At the Chiefs, that's a loss. Like, I mean, that is a really tough stretch there. So I think the Raiders, it is a really, really tough job. I think if you're the Raiders and you're Pierce and you get that job and you're the GM, if I were them, I would look to try to really go all in on let's find our future quarterback. Let's move on from maybe a couple stars and let's load the cupboard full of young, hungry talent who just aren't used to this Raider way, cheap talent, because the organization needs to save some money. They're paying some big contracts here. If I were the Raiders, I would look in the offseason, get what you can for Devontae Adams, get what you can for Max Crosby, let the running back Jacobs walk, and then just trade to go get your quarterback, and you know what I mean, and then start fresh and just say, we as an organization just need a complete fresh start. And if you do moves like that, yeah, it could be really brutal next year, but you could also put the building blocks in place. You know, if they get aggressive, they trade with Chicago for that number 1 pick, right? And you give us Max Crosby, and you give us next year's first round, and you go get Caleb Williams. You add Caleb Williams, you keep Devontae Adams maybe, and you have Hunter Renfrow, you have an okay offensive line, and then you load up with some other picks, and Vegas is going to be a free agent destination. But you have got to give your organization confidence, your fan base, that we can try to compete with Patrick Mahomes year in and year out. Getting Caleb Williams would bolster that, right? That would show we're going to try to compete with Patrick Mahomes week in and week out.
Yeah, I think that's what they need to do. And I've heard in the media a lot of people calling for a big splash move at head coach. And yeah, I push back on that because they're like, well, you gotta take risks. What do we call John Gruden? That was a big splash move. That was a massive
McDaniels
expense.
was
now
a
they're
splash.
paying. Yeah, and they're paying for these guys still. I mean, there is still money. To your point, they just don't have it. So, look, if they are feisty the rest of the year and they win some games, I'm totally fine with you just keeping Antonio Pierce. Or maybe you come back, go and get Rich Bisaccia and have him come back. I don't know, but a guy like that, and there are, Dan Campbell wasn't considered a sexy hire, but that seems to have worked out quite well.
D'Amico Ryans, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, these guys are former players, younger former players. Mike Vrabel, younger former players who are getting right into it.
These guys,
and I'm with you. I think Pierce is the way to go if he's not a disaster the rest of the way, and they're scrappy and they're feisty. And then if I were the Raiders, I would find a way to go get Caleb Williams. Like, Caleb Williams says to your fan base right away, we get it. We're in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. We have got to
you got to match aggressive. That.
We've got to be aggressive. We can't Jimmy G this thing. We can't Aiden O'Connell this thing. We can't Derek Carr this thing. Let's go get aggressive.
100%. Yep, couldn't have said it better. All right, well, that was a nice little recap and talking state of the Bears, state of the Raiders. And we will be back with our Week 10 recap this upcoming Monday, so stay tuned.